So this week I was going to make a video about the new changes coming to Titans to help fix their class identity, but something changed that. I've had this video's topic lingering in the back of my head for a while now, but I never really knew the best time to make it, let alone discussing it in such a way that would do it justice. I just finished watching one of the newest videos from Aztecross titled Destiny 2 Community, We Need to Talk, where he aired out his concerns surrounding the wishy-washy opinions of the Destiny community. On one hand, players want more challenge, more grind. On the other hand, players complain about Dual Destiny's 2-player requirement, exotic weapons from raids and dungeons being too hard to get, and a measly 10 light increase for the seasonal power cap next episode, among others. Cross also goes into detail about his overall feelings towards the state of the game, where everything feels like a checklist of things to do with no payoff, no reward, and ultimately no wow factor. Today, I'm not only going to respond to Cross's thoughts, but also discuss the feelings I have as a player myself, the direction Bungie has gone in designing the structure of Destiny 2, and some ways they could approach correcting problems before it's too late. Before we start getting into the meat of the video, if you haven't already, make sure you go and watch Aztecross's video on this topic, since I will be referencing it a lot in this video. I left a link in the video description, so you could check it out quick. Okay, you're back? Done watching? Great. Now we're all on the same page. Destiny 2 ultimately has an identity issue, and I'm not talking about the Titan class identity or the Crucible being overhauled every other patch. I mean, the game doesn't know what it wants to be. Is it an MMO? Is it a single-player campaign? Is it a co-op game? Is it PvE or PvP? Is it a looter? Is it ability-focused or a shooter? Is it made for casual players or hardcore? Does Bungie know what their target audience even is? Has that audience changed over time? There are so many questions about what Destiny is trying to be, and the game has been twisted and pulled in so many directions that I'm not sure anyone really knows what the game is supposed to be anymore. Without a solid, concrete direction for the game, it becomes a watered-down mix of everything. There's something for everyone, but not enough for anyone in particular. With Destiny 2 having too broad of a target audience, there are now too many voices in the choir. Aztecross is right about a lot of things in his video, but I think the community issues are a symptom of the deeper, core issues with the game and its current design. Let's outline the major concerns Cross brought up in his video. For one, players say they want a grind, but don't actually want to grind. 2, the game has become too casual. 3, the game has been boiled down to a weekly checklist of things to do. 4, there are a number of quality of life issues. And 5, loot like exotics or god rolls are no longer valuable. Outside of quality of life issues such as upgrade modules, resource management, and pinnacle drops, the Aztecross criticism list can be entirely encompassed by our second item. The game has just become far too casual. Destiny 2 becoming more and more casual is no accident. In fact, I would argue that it is a natural result of how Bungie wants to treat the game. They want it to be an easily accessible game with approachable gameplay, easy to understand activities and quests, and a clear path to getting powerful armor and weapons. There are 2 possible paths a developer could take to have a successful live service game. On one hand, you could have a relatively small, core group of highly dedicated players. These players play the game because they love it, and spend money because they want to support their favorite game. The other direction is to have a huge player population of less dedicated or casual players. There are pros and cons to both approaches. The riskier one is to invest in your hardcore players. You have less people playing, but if those players are die-hard fans, then they will be willing to spend more money to keep the game alive. This is the more rewarding path since you always have a reliable revenue stream from invested players. The other option, having a wide player pool, relies on having a constant influx of new players trying the game. You don't need to invest much into the deeper content in the game, since the vast majority of players will only play for a short period of time, with only a handful being converted into long-term players. The short-term players are far less likely to do much more than scratch the surface of what the game has to offer, as opposed to the long-term dedicated players. Bungie has more than likely been focusing on the wide player pool option. The biggest sources of new player or returning player numbers is during the release of major expansions, as well as a number of smaller bumps during new content releases such as seasons or episodes. These releases, although benefiting hardcore players, are not necessarily made for them. Expansion campaigns are a higher quality release that is focused on experiencing the story and making it to the end. It is the most easily accessible content for casual players. Boiled down, it's basically a checklist of missions to do in order with no power level requirement, no grinding, and no need for specific weapons. Players can hop in, play it, and hop out. Coincidentally, it is also the biggest revenue source for the game during the year. We could see this trend of easily accessible content across the rest of the game as well. Since expansions and their respective campaigns easily bring casual players in, it's no leap to say that this is also the reason for seasons and episodes having a very similar structure. Each season has a weekly checklist of activities to complete, with a small set of missions. There is no power requirement, no grinding, or specific weapons required for completion. A casual player could easily hop on each week, complete the checklist, experience all the story beats, and have collected all the new loot without spending copious amounts of time playing. From the perspective of the wide player pool approach, this makes a lot of sense as to why it could be good for the game. The drawback, though, is that this type of checklist content is to the detriment of the hardcore dedicated players. What I believe makes Destiny 2 special has always been the pinnacle content. Sure, Strike's weekly story missions and the yearly campaign are fun, but the hardcore audience is not interested in spending all their time playing those activities. We want harder content, raids, dungeons, exotic missions. We want content that rewards us for playing, for putting in more time than the average player. For one, checklist content funnels development resources away from these pinnacle activities, meaning less overall content for dedicated players. And secondly, checklist content by nature removes the rewarding aspect of completing the content in the game. One of the biggest pushbacks recently is surrounding the new power cap increase of 10 light levels starting next episode. In Aztecross's video, he pointed out that this complaint is crazy since we've had to grind hundreds of levels in previous seasons, so this 10 level grind seems like, well, a drop in the bucket.
Keep in mind, at one point, we used to have to grind hundreds of levels for every expansion. Hell, for seasons, we would have to grind for 50 power levels. This is 10 levels.
I don't disagree, but the pushback is rooted in a different issue, relating directly to the checklist content. The removal of the light grind each season was a welcome change for one reason. The content that was required for grinding out those levels was meaningless and unrewarding. It became a chore to grind for power, since the activities each season were tedious, monotonous, and were just a means to an end. For a casual audience, seasonal activities are ones that could be played a couple times a week to complete your checklist, and that's it. Casuals really have no reason to grind for hours to reach maximum power. They played to have fun, and then they log out. Hardcore players are required to grind these activities non-stop to get meta weapons, exotics, and power levels in order to access raids, grandmasters, and more, and be competitive in those activities at the same time. But they have to replay content over and over and over, and that content isn't necessarily meant to be infinitely replayable. And that's the core issue. Not the power grind itself, but the lack of a meaningful grind that rewards players while keeping them engaged. Let's talk a bit about the loot in the game. This is another smoking gun as to the direction Bungie has decided to take Destiny in. Aztecross had a couple analogies / anecdotes in his video, and they're pretty relevant here. One was about how in the past, you and your buddies could load up into the Crucible and be completely destroyed by someone with a weapon or exotic that you've never seen before.
What happened to the day where that guy in the opposing team would annihilate you and your entire squad? And you ask yourself, how did he do it? How does he have an overshield? How does he see me through walls? That's one-eye mask. Ding!
Destiny 2 used to have this magic sauce where certain loot was rare enough that only a handful of players had them. You'd run into these players and go, man, I really want that for myself. That weapon is really cool and I want to try it out. How do I get it? It would incentivize you to play the game until you either got the exotic to drop, or you would seek out the activity that rewarded you with it. Exotic missions like the Whisper used to be one of those sources. It was a secret mission with a really cool reward for those who found and completed it. You had to figure out how to start the mission, or maybe you learned it from a veteran player or friends who had already completed it before you. There was a magic in the looting of older Destiny 2, which is completely gone today. Now, missions like the Whisper, 0 Hour, or otherwise are a simple node on the destination screen. Anyone can hop in, finish the mission, and get the loot. The sauce is gone. But here's the thing. This type of system directly benefits the direction Bungie is taking Destiny in. No casual player is going to want to hunt down the steps to find and unlock the mission. They don't have time for that. They aren't invested enough to care. They just want to play the mission and get the cool thing. By allowing them to speak to a single NPC and just play the mission, it makes it easier for them to hop in. It's perfect for that type of player. It might be boring and unfulfilling to hardcore players since there's a lack of investment, or there's nothing special about the loot since everyone has the same easy access to it. The value is completely gone. This isn't to say that making content and loot more accessible is necessarily a bad thing, but depending on which players you're targeting with that content, your perspective changes. If you're targeting hardcores, you want to make the content that rewards their time and investment in the game. Not everyone will complete that content, but if you're targeting the most invested players, then that's okay. If you're targeting casuals, you'll want to make everything as accessible as possible to allow everyone to enjoy as much of the game as they can with minimal investment. The content may be shallow, but since you don't expect players to delve too deeply into the content, then that's also okay. Cross's other anecdote was about how someone like himself who plays the game for hours on end is equivalent in power and rewards to someone like Les who logs in once a week for an hour or two.
But instead, Les doesn't have to worry about that. He doesn't skip dessert. He continues to stay out with his fiancée. They have a lovely evening. He continues to contribute positively to society. And when he logs into Destiny, well, he's pretty much identical to my character. And that's no bueno.
Cross argues that he should be rewarded more for being a dedicated player. He should have all the power because he puts the time in to get the cool stuff. This is a direct criticism of the casual design of the game currently. As I mentioned before, modern Destiny appears to be designed for attracting a large pool of casual players. In this case, you want to give everyone an equal opportunity to experience what the game has to offer. That includes weapons, gear, exotics, and activities. Right now, it looks like Cross, myself, and other dedicated players have the same feeling. We don't want everyone to be equal. We want players to be rewarded for their investment in the game. But that opinion goes in direct opposition to the direction that Destiny has been taken in. So what gives? If players are so outspoken about what they want Destiny to be, then why is it still being designed for casual players? Honestly, I think it's because Destiny 2 has an identity crisis. It's an older game with a dwindling player population. It survives off of the hardcore players sticking to the game, but it needs an influx of new or returning players to keep the game floating. I think Bungie has figured out that the hardcore players will play no matter what. Seasonal content is bland? So what? The hardcores will still play. They'll continue playing whatever is fed to them. The people Bungie is trying to attract need something approachable, something to hook them into the game. So Bungie feeds everyone the same content, that which is meant for a casual audience. If the hardcore players will play anyway, why spend time investing in them? They play no matter what. What this resulted in is really Bungie versus the hardcore players. The people who are truly invested in the game are upset because the game is no longer what they fell in love with. Casuals won't speak up because they're happy for the most part. But the hardcore players have a hunger that Bungie is having trouble satiating. That hunger is in complete opposition to the goal of the company and ultimately what Bungie thinks is right for the health of the game. In addition, there is also a sizable population of casual players now, and those voices are also in the mix, trying to drive Destiny in a different direction. These players most likely don't want too much grind, they want easier access to resources and loot, and overall, they just want to experience the game. The content that hardcore players typically want probably gatekeeps these casual players who have less powerful loot. Just looking at something like contest mode and the sentiment around players not being able to complete a new raid the weekend it comes out kind of exemplifies this. At the end of the day, Bungie does need to keep all players happy, and the majority of players, like it or not, are probably casual players. So Bungie makes and invests in content that appeals more to those players. Hardcore players get content for them too, but not nearly as often. Is Bungie right about this? I am not too sure. What I do know, however, is that Destiny 2 used to have a spark that it doesn't have anymore. Something attracted me to the game all those years ago, and that same spark brought me back again and again. but it's really not there anymore. I think that the special sauce that made the game so unique and intriguing to so many players is what Destiny ultimately needs to continue to thrive. I mean, it brought all of us to the game before the checklist content started to permeate every aspect of the game. A game made for everyone is a game for no one. Every game wants to attract as many players as possible, but you want to attract the right players, those who want to play the game because it's the right game for them. Bungie needs to invest in what made the best looter shooter MMO what it is. Bring back the challenge, bring back the content, bring back the mystery, bring back the fun. Destiny isn't dead, but it might be doomed unless it figures out what it wants to be. If you made it this far into the video, thank you. I wanted to do something a little different this week since this topic has been on my mind for a few months now. By the way, Cross, if you're watching this, thanks for giving me the motivation to make the video. And if for some reason you're watching this on stream, hey chat, how's it going? Could we get a quick golden kappa check maybe? Anyway, if you like this type of video and want to see more, maybe give that subscribe button a little tap. Maybe even leave a like on the video too. I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts about the state of Destiny 2 down in the comment section below or over in my Discord server. I also live stream a couple nights a week here and on Twitch around 8:30 p.m. Eastern, and I'd love to talk about all things Destiny with you live as well. But I think that's all I've got for now. As always, I've been Rizeki, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.